of Central Florida, you're listening to the most electrifying show in media, A Neighbor's Choice. I'm your host, your neighbor, David Gornoski. So glad to be back with you for a live program coming to you on FM and AM and our website, aneighborschoice.com. We have a podcast, video platform, wherever you find us. So glad to have you. And let's roll up our sleeves and solve problems neighbor to neighbor. Isn't that a good idea? Isn't that what we should be doing more often than we are currently? I think we would certainly find a better environment for all of us, a win-win situation for all of us if we did that. We want to have a society that is functioning with win-win frameworks, not zero-sum framework. Zero-sum is I win and you lose. +1 for me, -1 for you. That is the attitude so much of our culture is owned by. Okay? When I look at our culture, when I see what we see in the headlines of our time, we understand that these things that we're experiencing are a product of what our passions are, what our desires are, and who we emulate. Who are the role models we're actually going to look up to? And that's what we see in the headlines. LifeNews.com says Satanic Temple opens new abortion clinic to kill babies in ritualistic abortions. Dear God. But they want us to react, you see. They like it. So even though it's healthy to react that way, when you fixate on that, oh my goodness, if you go there and stay in that zone of, oh my goodness, then you're giving the class clown, the fool, life for their act of defiance. You're giving them fuel to keep going in that direction. Because evil is at war with life. Evil is at war with the idea of procreation. Evil hates the idea of the womb being a safe place for life. Evil wants to wage war on the womb. Evil wants to wage war on the stable structures of life and vitality and abundance and post-scarcity. Evil wants us to feel that our desires are more important than our design. Evil wants us to believe that the desires that we have come from us rather than often come from those around us, the good and the bad role models that we pick up. And that's why you get this kind of learned helplessness when desire and emotions come and go. Relationships today are about what makes you feel good in the moment. But that does not take into account how things that make you feel a certain way are often modeled for you by those around you in society. The reason, for example, that our society is governed by programs like Desperate Housewives is because masculinity has been conditioned in our culture to be outlawed by official, polite, conventional society. So it goes underground. And it gets sublimated into different things. That gender differentiation is healthy and beautiful when it's properly respected, the polarity of gender. When we start to create rivalry, it creates a loss of polarity in the sense of the perception of difference between the gender, and ultimately it becomes everything is the same. Everything is the same spirit. And everything being the same creates conflict. That's why they say familiarity breeds contempt. Closeness breeds contempt. Fences makes good neighbors. Having a fence between what is male and female makes for good neighbors in a society. When you destroy the fence between what is male and what is female, you create what? what do you create? You create conflict. You create rivalry. You create the deification of desire to the point where you end up worshiping your emotional states as they come and go and being enslaved to them. So much of the emotional states that people have and the desires and the moods and things that we call disorders are because of food. The Bible talks a lot about the gut and the bowels and the heart, right? The heart has a stronger magnetic field than any other organ in the body. That's just the physical reality of it. And the heart is situated a little to the left, and the right hemisphere is where we have our intuitive, holistic integration side of our thinking. Most of our brains and most of our society are stuck on a over-dominant left hemispherical framework of logic, of analytic, of chopping things up into different classifications and to kind of create control over, sorting things and specialization, so that if you're into physics, you will only do ancillary, detailed work of physics. You can't talk about anthropology. You don't get to holistically integrate the system of knowledge together. That's what a right brain hemisphere framework society would be more in tune with. But the right hemisphere is more open to that intuitive sixth sense, some people call it, that intuitive feeling of holistic kind of empathy. And that's where your organs are dominated, your body parts are dominated by the other, the opposite side of the hemisphere. So your right hemisphere controls things on the left side of your body, including what? Your heart. That magnetic field that has more magnetic, field strength than any other organ in the body. So being in tune with your heart means you're magnetically sensitive. You're magnetically in tune with reading the room, so to speak, of an environment, of a relationship, of a community, of a church, of a car salesman. Is this guy sneaky or what? There's a vibe, right? That's what we call reading the room. Now, you can go too far with that, where you're just so super sensitive to that you're picking up vibes left and right, and you get overwhelmed, and you get tossing and turning emotionally, vibing all this way or that way. So it has to be anchored. It's not like the left hemisphere is bad and the right hemisphere is good. It's that these things need to be brought into kind of the right, proper balance. Ian McGilchrist, who I've interviewed, talks about this. How proper mindset puts the right hemisphere using the left hemisphere as its ally, as its kind of helper. So when you're right hemisphere dominant, you're probably going to be more magnetically sensitive to your heart's magnetic fields and other people's magnetic fields in the room. There's also a neuron level to this. Mirror neurons were discovered, and there's evidence back and forth on how much they explain, but I do think that that's a layer to understanding this too. The idea of your neurons mirroring what other people are demonstrating in terms of pleasure or pain or whatever. That's why we have to take every thought captive. That's why, we have to take every emotion captive, every attitude captive, and not react and give information or communication to people in moments where our emotions or our desires are caught up in a wrong direction. That's why it's so important, folks, to take every thought captive, to be able to understand that the feelings you feel don't define you, that the desires you have do not truly come from your true heart. Not all desires, I should say, right? If you watch the movie The Whale, it's about a father who chooses a relationship with a student rather than to stick it out and be there for his family. Because he said he was in love in the movie, The Whale. It was a movie by Darren Aronofsky. And it deals with these concepts of desire, and it doesn't get it right, but there's some elements of truth in any story of human characters and development that's thought out. But, you look at that and you say, okay, our whole culture is around deification of desire. Surat Dasgupta talked about this earlier this week when we had him on to talk about the sacrificial religious typography and imagery behind modern feminism and their embrace of things like Kali and this goddess of destruction. So all of these things are products of our worldview. When we believe that there is no loving God behind the universe, if we believe that difference is an affliction, then we are going to rage at the universe. We're going to rage at our own bodies as designed. We're going to rage at differences in height, differences in weight, in aptitude, in excellence, in achievement, in engineering faculties or physics ability or wealth differences. You're going to rage at perceptions of difference, and you're going to perceive them as being hell and tyranny. Because if you don't believe that this world is created by a creator that loves us unconditionally, then you will create other idols that will govern your life on earth, whether you know it or not. You will be enslaved by the desires of those around you, whether you know it or not. You will be enslaved by the desire for power. You will be enslaved by the desire for pleasure. You will be enslaved by the power of money and the desire to have more of it. You will be enslaved by the desire to be right and be considered smarter than others. You will be enslaved by the desire to feel as if you are distinguished and different beyond anybody else. Snowflake syndrome, right? You will be enslaved by the power of anger, resentment. When you get resentful of tyranny, you become enslaved by the resentment. If you don't learn to get past the reactive state of resentment, whether you disagree with the tyrants or not, the tyrants own you. When you don't act from a position of resentment and reactivity, you are free indeed to have an abundant life. So male and female are expressions of this differentiation that is healthy and beautiful. Differences in height, differences in skin tone, differences in genetic differences, differences in aptitude, differences in emotional intelligence, difference in intelligence, difference in cultural traditions. It is okay that the Irish have their own designs of clothes. It's okay. You don't have to get upset about that. It's okay that a culture in Kenya is different from a culture in Davos, Switzerland. Do you see what I mean? When you hate the universe, when you hate the concept of a loving creator, then everything that is naturally different in the design sense, and in some cases not designed but socially differentiated based on our choices, right? Be the same height, but one's really good at basketball because they trained and the other one's not, right? So that's a social thing that you learned. But if you don't believe that the creator and the universe are good, then you're going to hate every aspect of it that makes it what it is. You're going to be at war with reality itself. That's what we see today, folks. We see a society that is completely materialistic, meaning they don't believe anything exists but atoms and matter, but yet they are hungry to create this transhumanism stuff where they're always waiting for the AI to come out and tell them what to think because they want to create that synthetic version of the spirit that they feel they have intellectually defeated in history. Does that make sense? Do you follow? They believe that because of their scientific geniusness, the same ones that told us the COVID thing, they're all geniuses. They all know everything better than anybody else, right? But they believe that they have smoked out the possibility of a soul and a spirit and any kind of loving creator active and personable in our lives. And yet, we are not material beings fundamentally only. We are also spiritual beings, and matter and spirit play an interconnected dynamic in who we are. And so the materialist world that we're in, which says we're just dead atoms, colliding around with each other, is hungry for a materially derived concept of what would feel like a spirit. That's why there's this obsession with transgenderism, right? Of trying to say, well, I have my own higher self, which is my consciousness, which is detached and subordinates the body as I have been given it. And the same thing goes for this idea for AI. We will transcend our limitations of knowledge through material machines creating this hyper consciousness synthetically manifested by human ambition that will give us this kind of ghost in the machine new God. All of these things are stupid. All of these things are going to fall on their own face because they are rooted in something which is not even true. It's not even real. Sin is an attempt to deny reality.